in those fields who were getting PhDs, and hence more and more manuscripts were becoming available in those areas, covering topics that hadn't been covered before. And so there were more and more possibilities for books in those areas. So, in those areas I acquired books, and particularly one area which I'll tell you is, I happened to get into it by chance. The very first day I arrived on the job at SUNY Press, I got a call from the Anti-Defamation League of New York State. And they had called the press because the press had published a number of books on the Middle East, but had never published any books on Israel. And the reason it had been is that the previous director had been Armenian, and he was a specialist in Middle East studies, but particularly the history and culture of the Arab Middle East. So most of the books they had published previously were on the Arabic Middle East. But the Anti-Defamation League of New York State, is a Jewish-oriented group. They wanted to know why, since we were obviously tax-supported institution, why we had never published any books on Israel. And so I said to them, well, this is my second day on the job. I'll look into the matter, but that I was thinking that I would establish a series on modern Jewish history and modern Jewish literature and culture. Let me get back to you about that. And so I researched those fields, and I found that there were very few existing book series in that area, and that this was an area that was just coming into its own, that there were, like today, if you go around and look at every major university, there is a Center for Jewish Studies or a program in Judaic Studies. Well, back then that didn't exist, but it was just starting to exist. The universities were just beginning to develop that, and so I got in on the cusp of just that wave that was just starting in terms of the development of that Jewish studies field. And so I started a series in modern Jewish history with two co-editors, two women editors, Deborah Dashmore and Paula Hyman, who were like young scholars who had published several books and were sort of looked at as sort of the coming, the most important scholars in the field. And then I did a series on modern Jewish literature and culture, which focused on literature and the arts. And so I published a number of those books, and a number of them got reviews in the New York Times, the Washington Post, and got some publicity for the university. And so after 4 years there, acquiring books and growing the press from 18 to 45 books, I decided that maybe it's time to move on to the next level. And I saw a job advertised as for a senior editor at Indiana University Press in Bloomington, Indiana. And I applied for the job, and I included a list of all the books that I acquired and published in those 4 years as part of my application. And I got a call from their director, and he said, basically that my resume was on the top of his pile, and that he'd like me to come out and spend a couple of days there and see whether or not we could work together. So I did. I flew out. He made sure that I flew into Indianapolis rather than Bloomington because he wanted me to see that my concern was that Indiana was basically cornfields. And he said, well, that the terrain changes, becomes, rolling. So I flew into Indianapolis, and he picked me up, and when we drove down to Bloomington, and true enough, it was very picturesque. Get into Bloomington, which is a great, college town, and we talked for 2 days, and I thought we had a great interview. And then I went back to Albany, and then a couple of weeks later, I got a call, and he offered me a position, senior editor. Here I did something which was very not usual in my nature.
Mm-hmm.
I decided to take a chance, and I basically said, well, I don't really want to be senior editor. I would really like to be assistant director, because I'd like to get some administrative experience, and my hope is that someday I'll become a director. And so he said, well, let me think about it. And so he said, well, I really want to make you senior editor, and then once you come here, if you're here for a couple of years, then we'll see maybe not to make you assistant director.
Mm-hmm.
So I took a gamble at that point, and I said, well, I guess in that case, I think I'll have to turn down your offer. And hung up the phone. And then 2 hours later, I got a call back, and he said, okay, I'll make you assistant director. So I got there in Bloomington, and it was Indiana University Press was a really good press. It was, first of all, a larger press than SUNY was, and it represented Indiana University, which is a really good university, and the press was very entrepreneurial.
Mm-hmm.
Just in the same way that I became a very entrepreneurial editor, so was the director there, and we worked well together. And I continued to develop Jewish studies areas. I continued to develop history, which is obviously the area of my expertise. I developed a series on medical ethics, because that was a hot topic back in the early 80s.
Mm-hmm.
And I developed, maybe about 4 or 5 series. I should have my stuff in front of me so I can really tell you. Anyway, the books that I published there, I had a book, for example, called Our Gang. It was on Jewish criminals in New York City. And I know that the director said to me, well, that's a little too narrow. I don't know whether we want to publish it. And I kind of insisted that we publish it. And lo and behold, it got reviewed in the New York Times and the Sunday New York Times. So, and over the years, I managed to get a number of really great books. Let me see if I have my list here very quickly. This will help me as I'm talking about it. All right, so Indiana. Okay, well, I had again a series on American history, a series on interdisciplinary studies in history, which was a kind of history that used social sciences to understand the processes of history.
Mm-hmm.
I did. Hello. Hello. I'm wondering, maybe I didn't hang up on the phone here. Hold on. Maybe that's it. Okay, let me go back to this. So in Indiana, a number of the books that I published in Indiana were selected as choice academic books of the year, which was a high award given to scholarly books. The book is Choice magazine, which basically goes out, a magazine of book reviews, goes out to 45,000 librarians. So if you get your book reviewed in there, it gets in front of that big audience. And at the end of each year, that publication then announces the best books for the year, and they call them the Choice Outstanding Academic Book. So at Indiana, because of Indiana's sort of greater prestige as an academic institution, I was able to attract even better manuscripts than I was at SUNY. And so, I'll give you an example. I published a book called The Transplanted, A History of Immigrants in Urban America by John Bodnar, B-O-D-N-A-R. And that book got incredible reviews, and it was selected as the Outstanding Academic Book by Choice in 1985. And and one of the books I selected, called The Chosen People in America by Arnold Eisen, E-I-S-E-N, was a finalist for the National Jewish Book Award. I got in also when I was in Indiana. I got very interested in the history of religion. So I had, not only did I do Jewish studies, but I did a special series on religion in North America. And so I had a number of books published on various religions in North America. So I had a book, for example, by Thomas Ham, 2 M's, The Transformation of American Quakerism, which won